What is up? It is Kelly. I'm back with another YouTube video and I'm super excited about this one because it's going to help a lot of you out, just understand my personal journey, where I'm currently at, and also just give you some insight for your own journey. First of all, as always, if you do not already, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit the button down below, leave a comment, a like, and turn on those notifications because every single week I will have another video for you guys and I'm so excited to be here every week with you and I want to hear from you and hear what you guys like and what you want to see. So let me know down below. Today I'm going to be talking about how I lost over 20 pounds since the start of all of this crazy COVID quarantine stuff. So just a little disclaimer before we jump into everything. As always, everything I'm going to tell you is personally what has worked for me, right? This is personal information. This is not information or guidance for you to go do this or you to go eat these calories or you to go do, 4 months of cutting. This is just me telling you my personal experience, how I made the decisions that I've made so that I can give you some insight for yourself to make decisions for yourself. Do not just take what I'm saying and then just go implement exactly what I did because it will not work for you the way it worked for me. We are two different humans, have two different lifestyles. So just wanted to make sure that was clear and let's jump right into it. This is not the start of my fitness journey. I just want to make that clear as well. What I'm going to be taking you through is just the journey from after the kind of like beginning of quarantine until now, which is today, it's September 14th, 2021. This is about like a year and a half span approximately. So I'm going to be taking you through about from May 2020 till now. So let's talk about May 2020. Here's a picture of how I was looking around May 2020. I just personally was unhappy with how I felt about my body, how I felt in my body. And so I wanted to implement a change. You don't have to explain yourself, by the way, if you want to implement change. It's nobody's business but your own, okay? So regardless, I wanted to lose body fat, okay? Previous to this May 2020 Kelly, I had gone through a lot from January until May. So the 5 months leading up until this picture, I moved across the country from New Jersey to San Diego. And I was in this extremely toxic situationship that really ruined my mental health. But also, obviously the COVID stuff was going on, the quarantine stuff, right? Which was also another kind of blow to my mental health and to my overall health at the time because gyms were closing, all that kind of stuff, right? So with all those factors combined, between January to May, I did gain quite a bit of weight. So I was starting out this journey at about 144 pounds. Today I sit around like 123 pounds, 124 pounds. So literally about 20 pounds different. So that's where I was kind of like starting my journey, but this obviously wasn't the beginning of my fitness journey. It was just the journey to getting myself out of this complete shithole that I was in, honestly. Like I was at like really just a shithole place, but I was ready to get it together. So how did I do that? Well, first of all, I had to first figure out kind of where I was eating already. So I spent a decent amount of time just eating at the calories that I was at, which is 2,600 calories. And so I went from there into a deficit. So the first initial drop in a deficit will usually be a little bit bigger than the other drops that you are doing. So they'll be anywhere from like 200 to 300. You could even do a more aggressive drop in calories up to like 500. But for the most part, I would do a 200 to 300 calorie drop range. So that first drop that I did in May 2020 was 300 calories. So I dropped 300 calories off my calories and that was my new intake in the start of my cut. So I was now cutting. So even though this was the start of my deficit, really the only thing that changed was my calories. I did not change anything else in terms of doing more cardio or anything like that. I think I actually did add like a little bit of a step goal at first because at this time actually is when they were starting to ease up a little bit on restrictions that were going on in San Diego at the time. So you could finally go walk on the beaches, which yeah, you could finally go walk on the beaches. So I would go to the beach about like every couple days and just do like 30 minutes of walking on the beach when I could. So that's how I started out my deficit. And this is the way, again, like I said, I always start out my deficits, just a drop in calories and nothing else. So from there, from the beginning of May until probably like the end of June, early July, this period of time was a little bit tricky for me because I was still dealing with a lot of mental stuff going on and I was still trying to get myself better and get myself feeling better. So I was doing a lot of things that I don't typically like to do while I'm in a deficit, like doing things like not tracking my intake on the weekends and things like that. This is not something, again, like I said, that is common for me outside of a deficit. It wasn't even that common in this deficit to begin with, but I was doing a lot more trips and a lot more things because I was trying to get my mental health back on track so desperately. So there were a couple trips here and there that just kind of like obviously were not deficit calories when I was on these trips, but that's okay. Then I got CODA. So again, I started cutting in May. July 1st, I got CODA, and this really helps me get my steps in, actually. And this was not the reason I got him. Don't go out and get a puppy because you're struggling to get your steps in. But since I was struggling to get my steps in and I had him, it was actually really helpful for me to get moving more. So at this point, I was probably about like 2150 calories, something around there. And I was doing a decent amount of cardio. I wouldn't say a lot by any means, but this was also a little tricky for me for cardio because the gym situation in San Diego was always up and down. So some gyms would be open and then they'd close, and other gyms would be open and they'd close. So I had varying degrees of what was available to me for cardio equipment. And the gym that I was most often going to did not really have the best cardio equipment. I continued to cut throughout July and into August. And for myself, I like to keep my cuts around like 16 weeks long. I don't like to go much longer and I don't like to go much shorter. So this cut in particular, I started as, again, I said 2,300 calories. I actually ended this cut at 2,000 calories. I only dropped about 300 calories throughout the entire cut. And I didn't necessarily feel like super lean at the end of the cut, but I was at a point where I was done. I was ready to be eating more food. It was the end of the summer as well. It was the end of August. So I had gone home to see my family, and that was kind of like, I treated that as the end of my deficit, just kind of ate intuitively for that week. And I was ready to start eating more. So actually from the end of August until about early November, December, I actually did not count macros. I've talked about this before. I made a whole post about it. You can check it out here. That just kind of goes in depth about this experience of not tracking macros for a very long period of time. It was about, again, like I said, 3 to 4 months that I did not track macros. I just felt like I needed a break from macros. I had just met Greg, which a lot of you guys know is my boyfriend. I had just met him around like the end of August, early September. So we were just doing a lot of, new couple things, just like going to grab poke or whatever we want to do for food sometimes, drinking wine here and there, all that stuff. We were just really enjoying each other's company, and I didn't really want to focus on macros so much at that time. I had lost a decent amount of body fat, so I wasn't really necessarily super focused on my physique either and like changing anymore. I was kind of happy just kind of maintaining it. And so I just stuck with where I was at. So here's the funny thing, actually. Being intuitive for a couple of months, I actually came to realize that I was losing body fat, because although I thought I was eating enough food, this is typically what I tell people too, I was not eating enough food. And that is why macros 9 times out of 10 is really beneficial, because it helps make sure you're eating enough, because a lot of people do not eat enough, and that's not going to help you make muscle gains. It's not going to help you feel great hormonally or digestively or energetically. So you want to make sure you're eating enough food, and a lot of times that's why macros are really beneficial for that. So at the end of my cut, I was 136, 37 pounds. So when you think about it, I went from 144 to 136, 137. So that's about like 7 pounds, 7 or 8 pounds is what I lost in that 16-week period. Now that's not really a ton of weight, if I'm going to be honest with you. But like I said, through that deficit, I was being a little bit more laissez-faire with things and just really focusing on mental health while also still trying to progress physically. And also throughout that period of time, I was definitely taking my deficit a little bit differently than I did this past one. And I'll talk about that more when I get more into this past episode that I just did. From that period of time through intuitive eating, in November, I was 135 pounds. So I actually have a picture on Instagram. Again, I'll show it here, where I show the difference between from the end of my cut in August until November with intuitive eating, and how you can actually see I look a little bit leaner between the two. So from that point in November until March, I went on to reverse dieting. So I knew I wanted to lose more body fat. I knew I did want to try to put on a little bit of muscle if possible through the winter. More importantly for me was just getting my calories back up and getting it to a point where I could go back into a deficit and lose more body fat and get even leaner than I did this past cut. So I went into a reverse diet. Here's the thing with that period of time for me. My goal in that reverse diet was to get calories as high as possible. That was my ultimate goal. Like, I wanted to see how far I could push my calories while still keeping things in check as much as possible. So eventually my digestion did go to shit. Eventually I did start feeling like a little bit fluffier from especially water retention, a little bit of fat gain, things like that. But I did end up getting my calories to 2,900 calories. So they started around probably 2,150-ish calories, and I got them up to 2,900 calories, you guys. It's a lot of food. It's a lot of food. So So that is where I ended my reverse diet. You can see these pictures here from the before the reverse diet to after. And my weight from that period of time, I ended my reverse at 138.2 pounds. So how crazy is that? There's actually a period of time in here as well where in the beginning of my reverse, I actually was losing weight. In like early February, I was like 133.8. I was losing weight in the beginning of the reverse. Then the scale slowly started going up, but I only got to 138.2. Again, that's only 1 pound different from the end of my cut. And I was at 2,900 calories versus the 2,000 calories I was on at the end of my cut, which is pretty crazy. So then I started my second deficit. Now this is 2021. This is the most recent deficit I did, and we started in the beginning of March. So with this deficit, again, my goal was to get as lean as possible while still obviously maintaining my overall happiness, my metabolism, my hormones, just everything, my gym performance, all of that. So I started out the deficit at a very reasonable 2,600 calories because I dropped 300 calories from the 2,900. As I mentioned earlier, you want to drop about like 200 to 300 or a little bit more if you want to. Throughout that process, I did different drops here and there, different increases in cardio, different increases in steps. Now, what I mentioned earlier that I want to talk about is what I did differently on this deficit, because I was actually able on this deficit to lose a lot more weight. I lost about 16 pounds on this deficit versus like the 7 or 8 that I lost on the previous deficit. So I want to talk about why that was possible. So what I did differently, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, is I took more time off. I took more time, planned time to rest, and not just rest in terms of the gym, but with also my deficit. So I took refeeds, I took diet breaks, I took free meals every single week. Every single week I would have a free meal, if not 2. And so throughout that period, my stress levels were really low. Also, not to mention, I wasn't going through the same mental turmoil that I was the previous deficit, which really helps your body be responsive. So that also helped as well. But what was also different about this deficit is I dropped my calories a lot more. So instead of going from the 2,300, like my last deficit, to 2,000, I went from 2,600 to 1,875. So that's a lot of calories. I dropped about like almost 800 calories, but that's because I had all that room. And that's why reverse dieting and getting your calories as high as possible is so important, because it lets you have that space and that room to make adjustments when you hit plateaus in your deficit, and then you're able to lose 16 pounds without ever going below 1,800 calories. It was at 1,875 at the end, which is practically 1,900 calories. So I also wasn't doing a ton of cardio, by the way. I was doing 3 30-minute sessions throughout the entire deficit. So you really want to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to reverse diet, get your calories at a better place, your metabolism at a better place before you jump into your deficit, because it's really going to be beneficial for you in the deficit itself. So that's how I went through my deficit. And again, it was another 4-month deficit. I like to keep my deficits at 4 months, 16 weeks. So I started around the beginning of March with that cut, and I ended around July, the beginning of July. And I got down to about 125 pounds. And then from the beginning of July until now, I've been reverse dieting. Like I mentioned, the end of my calories for that cut was 1,875 calories, and now I'm at 2,225 calories. So I have not reversed too much. I haven't, increased my calories a ton, but I'm at a point that's really maintainable and happy for me. I feel pretty lean. I feel pretty good. I feel energized. I feel like I have great workouts. I feel like I'm recovering great. I'm sleeping great. All those factors that really matter to making sure you're at a good, healthy calorie intake. So the crazy thing is, from the end of my cut until this time, again, my weight did fall a little bit. It has come up a little bit more now. It's sitting around like 123 or 124. But again, I ended my deficit about 125 pounds, and it did come down a little bit as I was slowly increasing my intake and decreasing my cardio, which is just the beauty of reverse dieting. But as I mentioned earlier, the last time I reverse dieted, my goal was mostly to get my calories as high as possible so that I could have plenty of room in a cut. But this time around, it was not the case. I am really just focused on maintaining my physique, having enough food and enough room for food that I don't feel like I'm food focused or craving or anything like that. Like, I feel satisfied, I feel full, I feel perfect. So that's why I'm ending around like 2225 calories. I might go up a little bit more, like to 2300, but I probably won't increase again for quite a bit of time, because I just want to maintain the physique that I'm at. So if you guys have any questions about my journey, feel free to comment them down below. And as always, please subscribe, like the video, and tell your friends to come watch. Have a good one.